Hello, welcome to Wear Orange. I'd like to begin this virtual event by sharing our statement of intention and purpose. Our intention is to foster a robust presence of diversity, equity, and inclusion of and for all individuals and groups choosing to join our efforts. Our purpose is to work together to decrease gun violence and increase public safety across our nation. In our work, we value diversity, we advance equity, we demonstrate inclusion. We are a community. We are gun violence survivors, including victims and witnesses, change makers, and advocates who come together in partnership to work toward a future that is free from gun violence. In Kalamazoo, we work with our community partners to do this, the YWCA, Isaac, Kalamazoo NAACP, and Galilee Baptist Church.
Welcome to Kalamazoo, Michigan's Wear Orange virtual event. Millions of Americans in cities and small towns from coast to coast will wear orange to honor the victims and survivors of gun violence through virtual events on June 5th through the 7th. We wear orange to proclaim hope for a future free from gun violence. We all must come together and take a stand against the deadly mix of guns, white supremacy, and racism. We wear orange because every day, more than 100 Americans are killed with guns. We wear orange because firearms are the leading cause of death for children and youth. We wear orange because access to a gun triples the risk of death by suicide. Orange is the color that Idea Pendleton's friends wore in her honor when she was shot and killed on the south side of Chicago at the age of 15. Just 1 week after performing at President Obama's second inaugural parade in 2013. After her death, they asked us to stand up and speak out and wear orange to raise awareness about gun violence. What started as an effort by her friends to honor her memory has turned into a nationwide movement to raise awareness of all victims and survivors of gun violence. Here in Kalamazoo, we have marked this day for multiple years. Most often we have gathered in the center of our city in Bronson Park. We've remembered the lives lost to gun violence and asked others to join our movement and work for a future free from gun violence. Kalamazoo Moms Demand Action Group joins hundreds of other groups across the nation, partnered with Everytown for gun safety to show just how powerful the movement is and is becoming. We wear orange to demand change. We wear orange because we believe that a future free from gun violence is life-saving for all. Change is possible. We do not need to settle for status quo and be complacent that gun violence is merely an attribute of our society. Change is possible. We are united, and as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. My friends, we are not a small group. We gather with people across this nation today, bearing our orange as a battle cry of nonviolence that proclaims not one more. Change is possible, and we are the change that needs to be happening in our wounded nation. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most famous victims of gun violence, knew the profound complexities of violence and guns, but still declared, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you may murder the hater, but you do not murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. So it goes. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Let us pray as we begin this virtual event to have a future free from gun violence. O most holy and gracious God, we come to mark a day that is filled with grief and sadness and despair, and yet we do not lose hope that we can be the change for this world, that we can be the stars that light up the night, that bring hope to people, that bring change to people, because we demand it and we work for it. So God of all people, we pray that you will give us courage in this moment, in this time, so that we can continue the work to bring about a gun-free future. We ask that you would bless and keep our city of Kalamazoo. We know that gun violence has increased during this pandemic of coronavirus. We know that domestic violence has increased during this time of crisis. And so, God, we ask that you will bless and keep all people, that you will help us to know how to keep one another safe, that we can interrupt those times of violence and be peacemakers. God, we ask you to breathe upon our city and our people and make us whole again. It is in your holy name that we pray, that we live. And all people said, amen.
Thank you, Julie Kline, one of our founding members of Kalamazoo Moms Demand Action and associate pastor at First United Methodist Church in Kalamazoo, Michigan. You can see our agenda. Julie has explained why we wear orange, what it's about, and what our mission is. We're going to do a community spotlight. We're going to take a group photo and talk about social actions for #WearOrange, and then make a commitment to end gun violence. We encourage you to donate to our community partners, Kalamazoo YWCA, Isaac, the Kalamazoo NAACP. They are the ones that are leading our way in fighting against gun violence, to change our community, to prevent gun violence, and hopefully end it. As we begin this gathering, I want to take a moment to address the most recent spate of officer-involved shootings, police violence, and acts of racism that have been perpetrated against Black people in this country. As we all know, the people named in this slide are not the first to die at the hands of police. We have tragically heard of so many other stories where Black people were shot or otherwise killed by law enforcement. We also know that there are many incidents of excessive force used against Black and brown individuals by police that we do not hear about at the national level or even at all. According to the Washington Post, Black Americans account for less than 13% of the US population, but are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans. Hispanic Americans are also killed by police at a disproportionate rate. It is important to be explicit. Officer-involved shootings are part of America's gun violence crisis. And gun violence is both an instrument and a consequence of white supremacy. We cannot fight to end gun violence without fighting the forces of white supremacy and systemic oppression. As we honor and remember the victims and survivors of gun violence in all its forms all across the country this weekend, let's take this moment now to remember the Black lives taken due to systemic racism, police violence, and gun violence, both in recent times and in our country's past.
Hi everyone, I'm Shannon Watts, founder of Moms Demand Action, and I really want to thank all of you for joining us to recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and thank you so much for wearing orange. Wear Orange feels different this year for so many reasons, one of which is that we are outraged. For far too long, Black and brown communities have died due to racism and white supremacy. The killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police has added even more urgency to the conversations around police violence and its disproportionate impact on Black communities. Black men and boys are 15 times more likely than white men and boys to be shot and injured. And gun violence is the leading cause of death in America for Black children. We mourn the lives taken by racism and gun violence. George Floyd in Minnesota, Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, James Scurlock in Nebraska, Tony McDade in Florida, Sean Reed in Indiana, David McAtee in Kentucky. As we say their names, we know there are countless similar stories that haven't even made the news. While I wish we could gather together in person and stand unified in our efforts to end gun violence, our mission has never been more important. The coronavirus crisis is exacerbating the gun violence crisis in America. It's heightening the risk of domestic violence, unintentional shootings, and gun suicide. And just as gun violence disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities, so too does the coronavirus. There is not a public health crisis in the United States that is not made worse by systemic racism and inequalities. And while city gun violence persists, many violence intervention workers are limited in the work they can do during the pandemic. I am so grateful to all of our Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action volunteers who continue to organize to stop gun violence during this time and who have stood in solidarity at protests across the country. I am so honored to be part of this movement, and I am so impressed by your creativity. Together, we will honor survivors at more than 200 virtual events. Moms Demand Action started online, and even while we're physically apart, we've been able to come together and successfully continue our work. And we must all come together and take a stand against the deadly mix of guns, white supremacy, and racism. We're in this for the long haul, and we are changing the culture of this country. Thank you for supporting Wear Orange and for continuing to take care of yourselves and each other.
Racism in our nation, and we've known that for a very, very long time, since the founding of the nation, actually. We are really grateful for the support that we've had in terms of proclamations that have been passed by 3 jurisdictions. The County of Kalamazoo on May 19th. I want to thank Tracy Hall and others on the Kalamazoo County Commission for their support. For the City of Portage, that was signed by Mayor Randall on May 26th. And for the City of Kalamazoo, that Mayor Anderson signed on June the 1st. These actions are important to make a statement about what we believe and how we believe our communities could function better and more equitably if we could take hold of this thing called gun violence and change the way we deal with it. We're really grateful for folks like John Hoadley and others in the state legislature who have introduced bills practically in every session of the Michigan legislature. They haven't gone very far because we do not have a majority in the House or the Senate who are supportive. And I think the last thing I want to say about that is our vote will count in November, especially if we work hard to change who is in the state offices that are going to be elected November 3rd. And of course, nationally as well. Your vote matters. And more than that, and just as much as that, how you work for candidates who are gun sense candidates for this effort. I want to thank Brockway Pitchford for being here. He's running in Southwest Michigan. I want to thank Stephanie Moore, who's running, and Julie Rogers, both of whom are on this call, and also Jen Richards. We're really glad that you are here. And as you all know, John Hoadley is running for the 6th Congressional District. We know that we do not have a full-throated supporter in the person who's in that office right now. It's time we do a lot of changing and a lot of work to get the people elected who will have a chance to change the way things get done in Washington as well as in Lansing. I think I want to end with one thing. I was really impressed by the public health executive of Ingham County, Linda Vail. She used to be here in Kalamazoo, when she declared that gun violence and white supremacy is a public health crisis in Ingham County. And I think that is an important way for us to go. We're living with a public health crisis and have been for years. My last word is, today Breonna Taylor would have turned 27. There is no good reason why she died, but her death is not in vain. Not when we all stand up together and say no more to white supremacy, racism, and gun violence.
Thank you. I was prepared at this next time right now to talk about gun violence in Michigan, Kalamazoo, but I found a better way to talk about it. Before I let you know that better way, I do want to mention that Jen Richardson is also running in the 6th U.S. House District. So I just wanted to put that out there. So if you hang on, my friend Ed Genesis put this together better than I could even try to, about what we're faced with gun violence. Okay, can everybody see my Facebook screen right now? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay. Take it away, Ed.
There's a pandemic, the other pandemic, gun violence. All across the nation, we see it. But what are we going to do about it? And where does Michigan sit in all of this? Michigan earned a C on the annual gun law scorecard. That's average all across the nation.
So thank you, Ed, for putting that together for us. There are a couple things I just wanted to say, some statistics about Kalamazoo County that we used at the Isaac Issues Convention, where we started that gun violence task force. That Ed just threw a lot of information out there for us. Pats on the back, and thank you for putting that out there. We're doing some work with Isaac that's going to have an effect over the next year and a half in gun violence in Kalamazoo area. We're working with our partners. We're not making it up. We're not solving everything, but we're working together. So in the 5-year period in Kalamazoo County from 2014 to 2018 alone, there were 115 total gun deaths, and of those, 80 firearm suicide deaths, which is more than the 60% state average in Michigan, and 33 firearm homicide deaths, of which we could probably name quite a few of the names because we remember them. So we're going to move on and introduce, because we're going to talk more specifically and especially about our stay-at-home orders, violence underneath those orders. So we're pleased to introduce Sherry Brockway, the Director of Emergency Services at the YWCA, one of our community members annually, community partners in the Wear Orange event since 2016. She's going to talk about domestic violence in Kalamazoo during the pandemic and stay-home orders. Sherry, go ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone. As Rick said, I'm Sherry Brockway from the YWCA Kalamazoo, Director of Emergency Response Services. And so what we do is kind of an exciting new part of the YWCA, but we're responding in the community to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. So the goal is to, instead of victims always having to come to the Y, we are coming to them at a much faster time frame. So we provide crisis intervention and safety planning, which is probably the biggest task that we have to make sure individuals are safe. So I just wanted to start with some statistics on actually domestic violence and gun violence. So firearms are huge tactics that perpetrators use to control, terrorize, and intimidate victims in their home. Approximately 4.5 million American women alive today have been threatened by intimate partner with firearms, and 1 million have actually been shot or shot at by their abusers. So that is just a huge number. Now, the National Domestic Violence Hotline did a survey, and they found that 10% said their abusers had fired a gun during an argument, and 67 believed their abusers were capable of killing them. And so when we look at domestic violence homicides, 35% of all women killed by men are killed by intimate partner with guns. An abuser's access to a firearm increases the risk of homicide by at least 400%. Women in the U.S. are 11 times more likely to be murdered with a gun than any other high-income nation. So we know in the United States, gun violence is a huge problem in the world of domestic violence. So when we're looking at things, we're obviously advocating for gun control. We found that when a victim gets a personal protection order, it actually increases their level of danger. So 1/5 of homicide victims with temporary protective orders were murdered within 2 days of obtaining that order, and 1/3 were murdered within the first month. So we also know 2 months after a victim leaves a relationship is the most dangerous time for them. And that's why our safety planning is critical, as well as our advocacy for increased state and federal laws to protect victims of domestic violence. Now, when we look at racism, we know that has a huge impact on victims of domestic violence from in different communities and cultures. And when we look at it, it really boils down to the structural racism that exists in the United States. So the impact on Black women, 45% of Black women experience domestic violence, intimate partner violence. Young Black women have the highest rate of intimate partner related homicides. And due to structural racism, many Black women are being killed by Black men. Now, if we look at other ethnicities, Native American and American Indian women experience excessive rates of gender-based violence, and Latina women have the highest rate of intimate partner violence homicides out of any culture. And foreign-born women are nearly 2 times more likely to be killed by an intimate partner. So when we look at these state and national statistics, the statistics in Kalamazoo mirror them almost identical. If we look at the 3 homicides that we had last year for domestic violence, each of the women were killed by guns at the hands of their intimate partner. So we know we have a serious problem in Kalamazoo, and that's why I'm so grateful to everybody on this call. And I really like the passion that was displayed, because we don't have to sit idly by, and this is our time to really make change. And in Kalamazoo, over the last 2 months, we have seen a significant increase in the number of crisis calls and police-rated calls for domestic violence. So I'm happy to report one thing: it has increased our partnership with the police, and we are working to keep victims safe. And we started what we're calling a high-risk domestic violence team. And so if for any reason the victim does not contact the prosecutor or the police about prosecution, we're able to follow up with them and provide all the necessary supports and safety planning that they need to be able to participate in the criminal justice system safely. So I really appreciate you inviting the Y and allowing me to share some statistics on just how dangerous it is for victims of domestic violence currently in our nation, state, and Kalamazoo County. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Thanks for letting us know about some things I don't think everybody knows about the upticks and what it means in our local area. We do know some of the names of women who have been killed in domestic violence situations in the last year in our area. Wanted to highlight, Sherry works for the YWCA, has been there a long time, and they've been a constant, steady community partner with us. And the other groups with their emblems, their insignias on the screen, the Kalamazoo Metropolitan Branch of the NAACP, out front, TRHT, Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation of Kalamazoo, the Group Violence Intervention, GVI, both of them working under Isaac. And we just want to reach out and let everybody know that these are the community partners that we're working with to change some of those things that Sherry talked about. It's going to be hard work. We're not going to solve everything today. We also have been working with Al Concilio. I don't want to forget them in these discussions, and others. But in the chat box, there's a document that has the donation links for all these organizations. If you basically look at their websites, there's a donation button. At the YWCA, there's an in-kind list. You can donate things. Sherry, I'm not sure if you guys have a direct connection to Amazon, a wish list or anything. Some other shelters do. Do you know?
We actually do, Rick. We just started one, so you should be able to find that on there.
Okay, so
And I know.
go to
Yeah,
Amazon and look for Kalamazoo YWCA.
Correct.
Perfect, perfect. So you can do that under the stay-at-home orders, however they look today. The other group that want to talk about a community partner, they're not in financial need at this point, who has done some grant raising, is the Summit on Trauma and Domestic Violence, the logo in the corner. There's been an important discussion going on relative to all the things we talked about today among the courts, the YWCA, and all the agencies that we work with of how to stop trauma, which leads us to our next discussion, our next speaker, Mollie Peterson. Mollie, you still here? Mollie, are you on? Got to unmute.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank God you're here. We've been having trouble keeping Mollie connected to some other meetings, so this is made to be. She's the 2020 Everytown Survivor Fellow from Kalamazoo. She put herself out there and applied with Everytown and has received training, and she's spreading her word, and I'll just let her give her word right now. You can see our purpose, and she's our purpose. Thank you, Mollie.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I have to lay my phone down because I'm not able to hold it up, but I wanted you to see my face. I'm a domestic violence survivor, and as Rick said, I'm the Everytown Fellow survivor for Kalamazoo. And if I just want to give a quick nugget, because survivor is not listed on the, they are part of Moms Demand Action, but the Survivor Network is a nationwide community of survivors working together to end gun violence. But they basically network to connect survivors to each other, to amplify the power of our voices regarding domestic violence, offer trauma-informed programs, and provide information and services to support anyone who's been through domestic violence experiences. So with that said, I'm gonna give a real brief, share real briefly a little story about myself. It's an honor to be here today, first of all, and know that it's not easy to share about domestic violence. So I want everyone to know that I'm no longer a victim. I'm now a survivor, so I have to share that. And to begin with, due to an early separation from both my biological parents, I transitioned into adulthood in isolation from family. I say that first because isolation is one of the ways that domestic abusers use to gain control over their spouses. Second came fear. So when you add isolation and everyday violent and angry threatening to the picture, what do you get? I became submissive. When I became submissive, I was thinking I was keeping peace in the house and saving my kids. However, the threatening increased to hands-on physical abuse, banishing a gun, and constant name calling. So my submissiveness did not change anything. It increased to the point of whether fear, pressing charges, or attempting to leave were basically overcome by the fear of being killed in front of my kids, or my attempt to harm him had the tapes going in my head about I could be opening the door to my kids being raised without a mother in the foster care system. As a Black mother, one of the main goals is to sacrifice yourself for the safety and survival of your kids. Last came the use of alcohol or drugs or mental health. Could have been all three, I don't know, because the police never could find this man. He was a veteran. I was in this city alone, so I cannot say that either or one of those things was an issue, but it added to an already explosive verbal, mental, and physical time bomb. So without going into further details, I am alive to share my story. I learned how to hide and channel my fear and pain of domestic violence to protect my children. By protecting my children and hiding domestic violence, I was able to raise my 3 Black sons and fought to keep them from harm of street and drug violence, not to mention the stereotype of arrest and the prison to school to prison pipeline. I was able to teach my daughter to bypass teen pregnancy and work toward higher education. But the fight was not a walk in the park. I was alone with no supports. I was afraid to really go to the YWCA because the police officers would always kind of push it off like they could not find him. So if they couldn't find him, I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do? So I left it alone. I had to learn how to maneuver through the educational system with my children, because at that time it was nothing new. People talk about it now, but my Black sons were also in jeopardy of being placed in special education classrooms, the first to be on the list for prison entry. So in closing, my domestic violence was probably easy than some women because the window was already open. The window of abandonment and feelings of rejection from birth. So now my narrative has changed, and I have supportive ears and organizations such as the Moms Demand Action, Isaac, and Everytown Survivor Network. I speak my voice without judging myself, and I know that I have the experiences, tools, and skills alongside with sharing my story that can make a difference and change a life for someone. And I also know that when you change your destiny, you change your narrative. And when you change your narrative, I have an opportunity to change another domestic violence survivor, one mom at a time. That's it.
Thank you, Mollie. No, that's not an easy story, and you've
I left out a lot.
Changed the world. Yeah, you've done things to change the world. Thank you. We do want to ask if you are a survivor, or if you have a loved one who's a survivor of domestic violence, like we are survivors through our daughter's death. You feel free to identify yourself in the chat box, or if you want to talk about that when we take our photo shoot in a little bit, and just mention a loved one's name who is a victim of domestic violence. Domestic violence and gun violence are intertwined, along with systemic racism and inequities. So don't be afraid to identify. If you can't right now, there's always a time that you can talk with somebody in Moms Demand Action or the Everytown Survivor Network, or the YWCA. In a few minutes, we're going to take our photo shoot, and I want you to stick with us if you possibly can. I know some people need to leave at a certain time. We also are going to show a video at the end by a group of students that we'll talk about here in a second. Here they are. We talked about our local partners in Kalamazoo. We also have a group of national partners through Everytown. Let me read what it says right here. Due to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on funding streams and support for city gun violence prevention organizations, Everytown for Gun Safety Support Funds volunteers across the country are supporting 14 local partners, and they're listed here. The fourth one, Guitars Over Guns in Miami, is the video. They're the producers of the video you're going to hear with the students that they mentor with. We are fundraising for all of these groups until June 7th, and Everytown is matching donated dollars. So what you can do with this BARC scan code that's up there, I forget what the terminology is for it, but if you hold your cell phone up right now, it will give you a link to your browser, most likely, for the website that's raising the funds, a donation page through Everytown, which is legit. They do like to ask for money, but this stuff is really important. The groups you see on this list of national partners very much mirror the things that we do in Kalamazoo with our community partners that I listed in the previous slide. They do the things that we are doing in Kalamazoo. They do it in some really large cities and areas that have lots of problems, and especially right now with what's going on in our country. So please consider that. If you can take the time, I'll leave this up for a little bit more so you can get the link. And just hang on to it, spread it around to people. I'm not sure what the count is right now. Leona, you might have been looking. I know as of yesterday, they had raised over $120,000, I believe, and they will match that dollar for dollar. And so they've improved the amount of money going to these partners. Okay, so we're asking you to stick with us for a few more minutes. But right now what we want to do is we want to encourage you to show off your orange that you're wearing. Shockway, you can lift that tie up so we can see it. And your pen, yes. And I'll get this share screen off. We're going to take a gallery shot. Barb is going to take a picture for us. You can all kind of lean to where we can see your orange. That would be good. So Barb, I think this is us here.
Yeah, I was just trying to get my mute off. Okay, it's actually going to wind up being two that I will put together later. So those of you that came early are going to smile now. You ready?
Cheese.
Group one. Give me a second here. Okay, let's see how that looks. It's good. Okay, hang on, and we will go to group two.
We've all learned to do really odd things during this time, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Okay, everybody ready? Big smile. Yes. Beautiful.
Okay.
The second one. Okay.
All right.
That's good. So we got everybody, and what's going to happen then is I will put them together into one giant one and send it to Rick.
Okay, and we will block out last names on this. So if you have any problem,
We will we?
We could. Yeah. Anybody need, well, let's say, is that a good idea? Thumbs up to block out names, or not important?
Not important.
I hope not important, because it would be quite exciting to go
the
through
warning
one by
is
one.
Yeah, for people who may be involved in situations that are not safe. So just throw that out there.
To not
Ed?
show names.
Ed, you worried about that?
I was just
No,
gonna
I wanted to lift something up if I could.
Yes, let's go around. Go ahead, you go first.
Okay, how's everybody doing? First of all, I just want to lift up that it's great to be here and all working together, but we have to be mindful when we talk about systemic racism and we talk about Blacks being disproportionately not only killed but locked up. We have to remember that in Michigan, I cannot wear an orange T-shirt and not be, especially from being looked. If I wore just an orange T-shirt, then it looks like I'm doing something for jail. I work on criminal justice reform, and we have to be mindful. I did wear my orange bracelet, and I wore something with some orange trim on it. And maybe if we can get some some orange bracelets with the hashtag, then that way we can be inclusive with the whole community, because
Yeah.
it would be scary to wear a t-shirt. And yeah, so
Yeah. I saw your video on Facebook Live a couple weeks ago.
yeah, I wore the orange jumpsuit. Yeah,
That was effective. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. And I was supposed to call on you a little bit earlier. I'm sorry. I'm glad you
oh
checked
no,
in.
no problem. I just wanted to lift that up, and also just real fast, if I could say my father's name, Leslie Griffin, who was shot and killed by police officers in Gary, Indiana when I was 2. I just wanted to lift that up.
Yeah, we should have mentioned his name when we had our list there.
No problem. It's cool, Rick. I know where your heart is at. My heart is with you all. I stand in solidarity to put an end to senseless gun violence, and I'm just with it.
That's why you got the orange bracelet on, right?
That's right.
All right. Anybody else want to testify as to why you wear orange? Martha, you want to go ahead?
I wear orange for my daughter, Maggie, who was murdered by an ex-boyfriend in 1999 when she was a student at K College. He was also a student. And even though it's been 20 years now, it's yesterday. So anybody who's lost anybody, it never goes away. It changes, but it never goes away.
I'm sorry.
That's all.
I just want to add, listening to Mollie speak, I'm wearing orange for my mother-in-law, Doris, because she would be wearing orange for Maggie, but also she's got experiences very similar to the ones that Mollie outlined. So we have to remember that there are survivors that are among us that need help too. Anybody else? Leona, did you collect any names from the chat?
Actually, no. Oh, wait, maybe now?
Phyllis?
Nope, but thank you, Ed.
Phyllis, you unmute
But I
yourself.
will say that I wear orange for a friend of mine who, when he was 14, when we were 14, was shot and killed by his best friend in an accident. And for my husband's cousin who was shot and killed trying to break up a fight at a bar many years ago.
Okay, just unmute yourself and go.
I just like to say I wear orange because we need to change the culture. We're not a country of killers and guns and violence. That's not what we're about. But it's a part of our culture. When I turn on the TV and I watch all this violence and how the glory of guns and guns win the battle every time, we have to change that part of our culture.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm wearing orange today for my colleague, John Kivala, who struggled with addiction issues and then died by gun suicide.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm wearing orange for all those children who have been killed and are unnamed through the years.
In that light, I'm wearing orange for the same purpose, for all the young boys and girls I grew up with in Atlanta and Benton Harbor in Louisiana whose names never made it to the TV.
This year I wear orange for Trevante Brown, who was killed 2 weeks ago in gun violence here in Kalamazoo.
Thank you. Anyone else? We appreciate that you're all here with somebody in mind, even if you can't speak it. That's important. We will spread these photos around and the recording so you know that we are using them. Does anybody else want to speak up? Okay.
I wear orange for Vontae McFerrin, for Alex Johnson, and for Benito Ali. All young men that mentored my son and I've loved all their lives, and I still grieve that this can end.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry.
I wear orange for all of the students over the last 20 years that went to school thinking they were just going to read and write and do arithmetic and ended up not going home to their moms and dads that night.
All right. Anyone else?
Oh, I thought that was up.
Jen, were you going to say something?
I do.
Your audio's not on.
Oh,
Can't hear.
I do.
Go ahead, Molly. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I wanted to just lift up all the young men of color that lost their lives and between Kalamazoo, Bella Creek, and Ben Harbor, and their murders have not been solved. And they have mothers who grieve every day, wanting justice for their loved ones. So I wear orange for that today.
Thank you. Anyone else? You can also, oh, I see. Thank you, Jen. Tell me you're wearing for.
Salute to the real. You already know what the rest could get. The grind don't stop. Move accordingly.
I think that's something else in the background here. It's coming from everywhere. Okay. All right, I want to share one last thing before we break off. Yeah, I want to play the video from Guitars Over Guns. It's a local partner, and they did a video of Glory by John Legend. And after we have a closing prayer with Linda, we'll play that. And if you want to stick around, I'll play it to the end. It's about 6 minutes long with the credits. If you can't watch it, Leona just posted in the link in the chat box, which if you're not aware, in the chat box, you can download it. You can save the chat, and it will show up on your computer as a file, text file, if you want the information that's on there. So, Linda, you still here?
I am still here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I want to read something from Ibram X. Kendi in his book called Stamped from the Beginning. And I commend that book to you, not to read it straight through, but to read it in bits and pieces as you're able, because it gives white people a really good picture of where all of this has come from and why it has come. So I just want to say a couple of things from his prologue, which I underlined. Time and again, racist ideas have not been cooked up from the boiling pot of ignorance and hate. Time and again, powerful and brilliant men and women have produced racist ideas in order to justify the racist policies of their era, in order to redirect the blame for their era's racial disparities away from those policies and on to Black and brown people. And that is called white supremacy at the end of the day. That is what we're up against as we try to stop gun violence and other kinds of violence that comes upon communities of color everywhere. So I have found some words by Dr. King, and it's kind of a prayer, but it's really more of something to think about and to consider as we move forward, because I feel so much hope seeing all of you here today and hearing the stories and realizing that no one is alone in this. We're all working toward a shared vision of a world that is just. If there is no justice, there will be no peace. And so with that in mind, I want to share these words from Dr. King. I know all of you are not Christians, but listen to his words as a Christian pastor and take them into yourself in the way that will give you life and hope. Yes, Jesus, I want to be on your right side or your left side, not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right side or your best side, not in terms of some political kingdom or ambition, but I just want to be there in love and in justice and in truth and in commitment to others, so we can make of this old world a new world. And all God's people said, amen.
Thank you. I'm going to play. Steve, did you want to add something? Okay. I'm going to play the video by Guitars Over Guns, Glory, a rendition from the original by John Legend. It's about 6 minutes long, like I said. If you want to stick around and talk a little bit more at the end, we will hang out for a little bit longer. It's up to you. But thank you very much for everyone for coming.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that again?
The day of real glory is the day when we're not scared. One day, when the glory comes, he'll be ours. He'll be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we'll be sure. We'll be sure. Whoa, glory.
Glory, while I'm calling no Maury. Yeah, I know my pops, but that's not the start of the story. Been hated cause the color of my skin. Been popping bottles just so I won't feel the hate within. The type of guilt I felt for being black, embarrassed. I hid on the shelf because my color was embarrassed. Now we have equal rights, but not the fairest. I lift the rest, make this clear, so who's the fairest. I went from cursing the teachers for standing for my rights. Segregate the class, finish teachers fight. But I rise like a cobra. I feel like a soldier, straight bars in the toast shit, like a toast in a roaster. Fall right like mimosa, I ride a beat like a coaster. Doing it with the culture, they pick it from me like vultures. Worked hard, but they deprive me of a coach's style that they strip me of. There's no effort to put in this, I'm winning this. MVP award, yes, I hope for this. Glory goes into this one achievement. I'm wanting this, just missing the hatred, eating this. Can I digest all this pain that I seem to throw away? Feeling the pressure from all the things around me that's betrayed. Pushing towards the things people told me to evade. So I'ma break the limit overnight that got me weighed. Falling graves, can't run my pain, endless tears, cause heavy rain. Violent thoughts I can't explain, held down to deepest shame. Letting someone in takes a piece of you, feeling empty cause they're me and too. Feels like I'm suffocating, air pollute. The glory God, people envious. Bodies dropping from freedom, temperature Celsius. I'm killing this out does, hit the compliments. Any feels I'm super dominant. Swear it's not incompetence, probably it's just a confidence. Isn't over. Victory isn't won. Both fight on to the finish. When it's all done, we cry glory, oh glory, glory. You had me in chains, the least still engraved on my skin. The pain I felt deep within, deep in it. Creeping in, it was out like on my deep creator from the roots of my people. After they ride, forced upon the waves. Apologies for the slaves inside their graves who can never see the future. Not the black president, not even Martin Luther. They give us flip all
harder than dreams in the Kama Sutra. They give us broken books and churches for the hallelujahs. Why you ain't give me a tutor, but you gave me a Ruger? It's only pulling triggers, so I learned how to shoot it. War life not working. Hurry up, choose the path. Wrong, right, wrong, keep thinking till I'm gone. Sedate me with the media by handing me the stop phone. But you know I can't afford that you say it's my choice. Yelling till I'm numb, I can't use my voice. What it matter, you ain't listening. My skin tone determines the importance of my mission and my briefing it. So the blacks need light, just like blacks need right. You kill one day, when the boy comes, he'll be ours, he'll be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we'll be sure, we'll be sure. Whoa, look into our eyes, I can see the thing. Struggling every day, gotta make a change. And everybody changed to forget the pain. Yeah, I'ma be the same, still will never change. Got my mama and my father, cause they the one that pushed me and they made me ground harder. And I'ma stay in tune, cause they help me move smarter. And I'ma keep on grinding, cause it's gonna take me farther.
Gotta go, but thanks.
Thank you. Just wanted to play the credits because that's pretty incredible. All right, well, thank you. Anybody want to talk about anything else? We've talked about some issues and probably didn't cover them extremely well. We do intend to continue conversations with our community partners.
I just wanted to say thanks everybody for being here. It's always so good to see you all. So hang in there.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thank
working.
you, John.
Echo John too and say thank you and thanks for having me. It's I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Nice job, Rick.
Yeah, it came out well, and
It did.
things kept changing. And Ed, I don't think Ed's still on here. I appreciate.
Thank you, Rick. You have a good evening.
Good to see everyone. Take
Thank you.
care.
Barry,
Thank you.
for joining.
Maybe we'll see you Sunday, right, Rick?
See you. Yes.
Thank you for starting with a spiritual message and ending with a spiritual message. I wish every group that I attended would start spiritual and end spiritual. It's just good for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah. Excellent. Nick Swain, nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored, and it was a great event. Thank you so much.
Tell Jen thanks too, and I think
Will
that she
do.
was going to say something, but she couldn't get the audio on.
Yeah, So
I know that she's got experiences in Chicago schools, so.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for being here.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Have a great night. Stay safe.
Sherry, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. I'm gonna end it. Jim, thanks. Good to meet you through Zoom.